GM, good morning. Welcome to the Milk Road Show, the daily crypto show that's as comforting as hearing "Let's just order pizza" on a Friday night. I'm your host, Jay Hamilton, and today we are joined by Kyle Reidhead, co-owner of Milk Road and head of research at Milk Road Pro. We are going to discuss, is this cycle going to be bigger than the last? Now, historically, each Bitcoin cycle has had less returns than the previous one. And if we were to match previous cycles, then we only have about a 2x left to go from Bitcoin from here. So either that's it, we only got a 2x for Bitcoin from here, or are we breaking the norm? We're going to take a look at some charts to understand which way it could go in this cycle. And also stick around to the end, because at the end, we're going to explain why we don't use prices to dictate the top of a cycle and why we use indicators. And we're going to talk a little bit about which indicators those are. Before we jump in, guys, the milkman has lost his mind. He is giving away the craziest sale of the year on Milk Road Pro. You can get 40% off this week only in celebration of Black Friday. And if you sign up for the annual plan, you get our crypto investing masterclass for free. That's priced at $500, and we're going to give it to you for free right now. So click the link in the show notes. If you're listening on YouTube, hit the QR code and go pro to make sure that you make life-changing money in this cycle. Before we jump in, we're just going to take a moment to hear from our sponsors who make the show possible. Do you own your data? Nope. Every post, click, and search you make is controlled and monetized by unseen giants. I've had enough. It's time for Navigate, where their mission is to give back data ownership to you and share profits with you. That's right, money in your pocket. How, you ask? First, the Navigate browser extension makes it easy to turn your everyday browsing into passive income. Second, the Data Quest game, where you can boost your earnings and help train their AI. Visit navigate.io today to earn and own your data. Meet Uphold, a trading platform that's changing the way you think about money. Imagine this, earning up to 4.9% APY on your US dollars. No catches, no lockup periods, and no fees. And yes, it's FDIC insured up to $2.5 million. They offer access to over 300 digital assets, which you can trade, store, and exchange with confidence, knowing Uphold operates with a 100% reserve and a transparent model. Create your account, fund it with a few taps, and you're ready to go. Click the link in the description and join Uphold today. Kyle, how you feeling, my man? I see you looking at the charts.
All day. We hit 99,000 today just before we started recording. I know this doesn't come out for a day after, but maybe by the time that this podcast goes live, we finally hit 100K Bitcoin. What a time to be alive. What a time to be in crypto. Kudos to all you who are listening to this podcast. You were in before Bitcoin hit 100K, and that's pretty sick.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal. On that note, we've had incredible growth over the last few weeks on the podcast and on the YouTube channel. So shout out to all the people that are new here that we have not had in the past. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for being here. You guys are also still early. So don't worry if you got some FOMO and you're feeling like you're too late. You're not too late to the party. We got a long way to go from here. Kai, let's start out. He shakes his head as if we don't have a long way to go from here. That's the question we're going to answer today. Do we have a long way to go?
We are trying to discuss that.
Let's just start with taking a look at past cycles. And if you could just give us a breakdown of Bitcoin in past cycles and where we are in the current cycle based upon past cycles.
Yeah, so for those that are new that maybe haven't been in crypto before, and even those that have, it's always good to remember crypto moves, or at least has historically moved, in this very cyclical nature. It is oddly basically every 4 years that we go from top to top. And it started, when Bitcoin first started, but then our first sort of like top or peak in the market was 2014 was the first top. Takes about a year. We come down to, a bear market. We hit the bottom and then we go up, and the next cycle. So the second cycle topped out 2017, took a year for a bear market. Then again, we came all the way up. 2021, we topped out. Took a year to come down, almost identically every single time. Like even on this chart that we're showing, Jay has up on the screen here, like the green is the top, the red is the bottom. And then he has like the distance between, and the days, it's almost to the day. It's actually insane. Like not exactly, but very, very close to the day each cycle. So then we hit the bottom 2022, around a year after the top in 2021. And now, who knows? We're back on the up again. So is this going to be another 4-year cycle? We don't know. Historically, it's been this way. We tend to think it's following this pattern because liquidity has also been 4 years. So global liquidity, meaning central banks around the world printing money, are lowering interest rates. They're sort of refinancing their debt every 4 years. And so they have to print to pay off their debt every 4 years. That's how it's been since basically since the financial crisis of 2008. At some point that will stop, but that's kind of what we believe is driving these cyclical nature of crypto. Another part of it is just this is kind of just how psychology works. It's like something goes crazy. Everyone thinks it's going to change the world. Everyone wants to buy in. Everyone makes a bunch of money, but then people sell eventually, right? The bubble pops and everyone kind of leaves the space. And then it takes a little bit, generally about a year or so, I guess, for, people to kind of things to bottom, people to be like, actually, this thing's not dead. We're going to keep building in here. And people go, oh, the thing didn't go away. It wasn't a tulip from back in whenever that was, thousands of years ago. And it's slowly people start to come back in. So as a result, the price goes up. This happens in other markets too, not always in the same time frame, but it's kind of what we've seen 3 times in the past in crypto, maybe even 4 if you were here in 2010, 2011, but I wasn't around then. And so we're sort of going through that same phase now. And what we're wondering as we get to this point in the cycle, close to 100K, is are we going to have the same thing? Is this going to be another 4-year cycle? If it is, just based off the years, it's looking like October-ish of 2025 will be the top. Now, I have no idea if that happens, right? That is maybe a base case, but I'm not even sure that's mine. But that's at least tracking the 4 years. And so what we kind of wonder as we look at these charts, and a lot of people are doing this on Twitter, is if October is the 2025 is the top, what price are we going to be at by then? Is it going to be similar to last cycles? As you said in the beginning, the results tend to diminish cycle over cycle, at least for Bitcoin and total market cap in general of crypto. We don't get as big of a ROI each cycle. We still have some amazing results. You can still make a shit ton of money, but we'll show you some charts. But basically, you used to go up hundreds of X's in the previous cycles because we were so small. We were going from millions to billions, right? And then billions to trillions. And now we're already at a $3 trillion asset class. I don't know what Bitcoin is, but probably getting close to a $2 trillion asset. We are not as small as we used to be. And so it would make sense that over time we'll have diminishing returns. But that is the question we'll try to answer today. But we are in our, let's say, 4th cycle in crypto. Depending on how early you were, you could say 5th. But we're pretty much in our 4th. And the question is how far does this go? Where do we go from here? We started last cycle. So the high we hit last cycle was 69K, which is crazy that that's the number we hit. So funny. And we're already at 100K. And there's still potentially another year to go. I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, I think there's so much to dive into and break down here. Bitcoin is at 1.95 trillion market cap, just to follow up on that. You brought up ROI. So what is the return on your Bitcoin investment in each cycle if you were to buy at different points? And let's look at a few different points. Let's look at if you were peak to peak, from the peak of one cycle to the peak of last. Let's look at from the bottom to peak, and then let's look post-halving, because those are the 3 time periods that are always interesting to look at. And let's look at how much are the returns diminishing, so we can understand what we might expect this cycle, and then that can lead us into, is that what we think is actually going to happen? Why don't you start us off with the ROI on Bitcoin from peak to peak?
Yeah, so this one's it's quite interesting to look at these timeframes. Again, I don't think anything plays out the exact same. We're not going to copycat any other cycle. It's just nice to look at these timeframes and give you sort of a range of where things might go or how things have performed in the past. And you can sort of make decisions based on what's happening in these moments. And so if we look at peak to peak, if we look at 2017 peak from the one before that, which I think was 2014 or 2013, whatever it was, Bitcoin did basically a 19x from peak to peak. So from the previous all-time high to that all-time high, okay? Then we had the 2021 high of 69,000 to the 2017 high of, I think it was around 20K actually is what it hit. And that we had about a 3.7x, 3.6x, let's call it, maybe 3.5, somewhere around there. Okay. And then today we are already, if we look back from where we are now, based off of the peak from last cycle, which was 69K, we are already at about a 1.5. And this chart was from a couple of days ago. I can't see the date on it. But so we were probably about a 1.6, 1.7, maybe 1.8 from then already. And so question is, where do we go from there, right? If we're matching the last cycle, then we've only got about a doubling left, maybe even a little bit less of a doubling, which is kind of wild because that means that Bitcoin only goes to like 150 to 1, like let's say 75K, which is crazy because we're already so close to that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we have a year to go. That's not much left. Now, hey, my base case and what we've always said on the show, and especially in pro, is we think Bitcoin goes to about 150 to 250K, right? That's just kind of a price prediction. It's kind of random. It doesn't really mean anything. That's not what we're basing on, but that's just sort of my guess. And so like if we did hit the 150K, that would kind of match the last cycle, maybe a little bit higher than that. And if we go above it, which we might, it means that we break the norm and we actually don't have diminishing returns. And actually Bitcoin goes higher this cycle than last cycle. That would be pretty wild. It'd be unheard of. We've never seen that in any cycle. And we'll kind of show you only have 2 on this one, but we get to some of the others, you'll see there's more cycles that we can look at.
Yeah, and I think let's keep looking through the charts. But we're going to talk about why could it be different or what's different in this cycle. Because as you said, every cycle is not exactly the same as the last, and there's a lot of reasons why this cycle feels different.
And a sobering take. So from 2 cycles ago, the peak to peak, we did, as I said, like a 19x. Last cycle, we did only 3.7, right? So why do we think that we would get to even close to 3.7 or 3.5 or 3, right? Like we should be way less. That was less than 50%. It was like a 75% decrease, diminishing returns. Like if we had that again, like shit, we'd already be at the high.
We'd be at the top now.
Damn, I hope that's not it. But that's why you don't want to just like only look at charts, but it's just interesting to see this, you know?
What about if we look at returns, the ROI from bottom to peak within each cycle?
Yeah. So if we look at bottom to peak, I also have it pulled up here. Which, by the way, shout out to Benjamin Cohen for pulling out these charts. They're pretty great. So if we look at bottom to peak, we had again the 2017 cycle to its bottom. The bottom before that, it went up 110x from the bottom to the peak. That was a crazy bull market. It just like never ended. It was crazy. I mean, the same time frame, but it just only went up. I mean, there's crazy pullbacks, but like it was a ridiculous bull market. Then last cycle, from the bottom to the peak, we went up 11x. Okay, still pretty wild. And then currently, from today, from the very bottom to where we are today, we are at about I don't know what I can see what that actually is, but it's like a 6 or 7x already.
I think it's 6.
Yeah, 6. Might be a little higher there, but so 6 or 7x already. So we're again like we're a double away from meeting the same numbers as we did last cycle. So are we going to beat last cycle or are we going to do the same? Because if we are, then once again, we're kind of sitting that 150 to 200K range for this cycle.
Which is so funny because look, we're sitting here as if like doubling your money in the next year is trash investing, you know, like that's not good enough for us at all. But it's not true. Like that is incredible returns on investing. But we're bringing up this question because like it is a legitimate question when you think about your Bitcoin investment, and we're at a point in the market when you might start to think like you want to go heavier risk on, you want to allocate to bigger things, and understanding this is really important. Let's look at the halving time since the halving, because this one really, I can't break this one down. This one not confuses, but this would blow my mind if this ended up being this way.
Yeah, this one's a bit different. So this is looking at, okay, the halving point. So every 4 years, Bitcoin, a lot of people think that these cycles happen because of the Bitcoin halving, which is basically Bitcoin's inflation rate goes down, gets cut by like 50%, and every 4 years. And it's somewhat in line with these 4-year cycles. And we just had it in, was it May or April or whatever of this year?
Yeah.
And so generally what happens is the cycle really takes off after this halving, usually like a month or two afterwards. And so we look at, there's 4 cycles on this one here. And if we look at the first cycle, so cycle number 1, this was like back in like 2014, it did a 100x from the Bitcoin halving point. Okay. Then the 2017 cycle, it did let's just see here. It's hard to see these numbers, about a 30, like 2x from the halving. And then we have last cycle, which did about an 8x from the previous cycle, or sorry, from the halving. And then we are only about a 1.5x currently from when we did the halving in April. So in this one, it's actually a lot more bullish outlook, which is if we were just to match last cycle, we still got like a 5-6x to go. I'd put Bitcoin at like 500K. Now, the reason why I don't like this one is this was already the first cycle where things did change. We hit an all-time high before the halving. We've never had that in history before. So we're comparing off of a much higher number. So to do a 5x like we did last cycle doesn't really make sense because we were already so far ahead this cycle. We were kind of accelerated in terms of price action. So that one's a bit of a weird one. I don't know how that one plays out. I'd like to, I guess, look more at the bottoms and the tops of previous cycles, because the halving one was just a little bit weirder. Or maybe this one's right and we are just tracking one hell of a cycle. I don't know. Who knows? Yeah. Another question first, Jay.
Yeah. Okay. So let's zoom out for a second. When you look at these three charts, it clearly tells you, minus the happening chart, which I agree. I don't think that's the best chart to look at, although I love it. Either we're close to the peak, or like we only got 2x to go for Bitcoin, or we're going to beat the previous cycle. And this cycle is different, which I feel like everybody says don't think it's going to be different, but there are reasons to think it's going to be different. What do you think, Kai? Do you think it's going to be different, or do you think we're just going to see the same thing play out?
It's it's so hard to say. I don't know if it's going to be different. I think saying it's going to be different, saying it's going to be the super cycle is never a good idea. And one thing to watch out for is you're going to start to hear this more often as we get further on in the bull market. So last cycle, everyone said the same thing. This is the super cycle. This time's different. We are not going to have a bear market. Blah 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 blah. You know, we have apps this time. We've got NFTs. We've got real things. We've got institutions coming in. Blah blah blah. This time is different. And it wasn't different. You know, it turns out that markets tend to play the same way because it's based off psychology and it's based off liquidity, which doesn't care about what's happening in crypto, right? And my assumption for now, at least my base case, is the same thing plays out. Now, I don't necessarily know what that means in terms of return, but I think we see a similar styled cycle. I don't think we go into this like crazy super cycle, although I will make a case for why we might have an accelerated cycle, I think later on here in this episode. But at the moment, we're kind of, I don't know, we're sort of tracking the same. And like pre-cycle, pre-euphoria, which I think a lot of people are already in, like, I don't know, we said we'd probably hit about 150K to 250K Bitcoin. It seems weird to say it's only that much more now, you know, because we're still so early. It's happened so fast. And it's like there's all this potential that can happen. But you also got to remember that, like, as we get bigger, like you just said, we're a $2 trillion asset. It gets harder and harder to move the prices of that up. And I know we're in the phase right now where it's like, it seems like it's so easy to move up because we go up 5% every day in Bitcoin. But last cycle, that also happened, right? In November and December, we hit our all-time high. I can't remember if it was in October or November, whatever it was. We passed 20K and we doubled to like 40K in like weeks, right? And then we kept going. And it, you know, it took until when did our first top, we had kind of this like double top last cycle, but that first one was in like, I think it was March or something like that, March or April. And so like it didn't take, it took like 5 months for us to go from 20K all the way up to like close to 60, 69K, right? So like, but then it couldn't go up anymore. Like that was kind of it. And so like you have these periods where it just feels like this thing's going to go up for forever, right? And all these good stuff's going to happen. We're going to get good regulation and Trump's taking over and nation states are going to buy and we're going to be the strategic reserve. And like, it's all great, but like markets don't usually work that way. There's a chance, there's a probability. You always got to have that probability, which is why I say, even when you think you're at the top or you're trying to take profits, you never sell everything because there's always the chance it just does go up for forever. I just think it's probably very unlikely, and it's just not generally how markets work. So I don't know. One thing I do think about a lot here is last cycle to me felt like it was a stunted cycle. And this is the thing, the reason why I might think maybe it's not super cycle, but we do outperform last cycle. And that's because last cycle had a few weird things that sort of happened. I'll kind of list some of them. So we were in this bull market, everything was, and we were printing a ton of money. And the problem that happened last cycle that didn't happen in the cycles before it is inflation went to like, I forget what it was, like 10% in the US. And honestly, globally, it was this high. And we've never really had it go that high since like, I don't know, the 70s or whatever. And that happened because of a black swan event, because of COVID, where we had to shut down the global economies and basically stall the economy for like, I don't know, what was it, 6 months? Some places it was like a year where you couldn't go into work. So that doesn't really happen. And we don't have that this cycle. And so what happened was inflation went so high because of that, not because of the money printer or not because of, you know, anything else, but just because of the supply issues, that inflation was so high that we had to just crank up rates to the highest we've had them in like years and years and years and years, right? Up to like 5.5% or whatever it was in the US. And so that was a big reason why the bull market ended and we kind of shot down back into a bear market, right? We also had this like issue around all of these centralized companies which were holding crypto that were sort of over leveraging it. And when interest rates shot up because of inflation, they were all kind of caught with their pants around their ankles and some shady shit happened. And so people in the space saw that, funds in the space, institutions in the space. And so they started moving and getting out of the industry pretty quickly. They removed their capital. And then we had that double top. And the reason the double top happened, at least in my opinion, is because FTX started taking customer funds and like re-putting it in and reinvesting it, right? Which was crazy, but that propped up the market. And so we had this very weird, like technically the bull market last year could have been cut short and ended in like March or April. It didn't though, because we had this fraud that happened in our industry. And so that was really weird. And then the other thing I think of is we also were cut short in terms of a lot of people got priced out. And that won't happen this cycle because we got priced out because NFTs was the big thing. There's always a big thing that happens in a cycle. So like 2017, it was ICOs. The last cycle, it was NFTs. This cycle, it appears to be maybe meme coins. I don't know. But last cycle, we had everything happen on Ethereum, and to trade on Ethereum was like $100 or $200. So like that priced out people. And then obviously NFTs had this weird dynamic to them where the prices went so high that like it priced out most of the market. And so people were like, well, screw this. Like, what am I doing in here? So there was a lot of weird scenarios that happened last cycle that maybe stunted it. And maybe we shouldn't have been as bad of a performance. And I say bad, it was not a bad performance. You could make a shit ton of money. Like, remember the amount of X's I just said we went up. But those are the things that make me think that maybe we don't have a super cycle. I don't think that, but maybe we still outperformed last cycle in terms of results just because it felt like a bit of a stunted cycle. Also, we didn't have ETFs. So institutions, although they were interested, they actually couldn't come in last cycle. So I don't know. The other side to it though is with every cycle, you feel like it should go up more because there's more apps and there's more institutions coming in, et cetera. But as I said before, the asset is so much bigger that it's now harder. And so like just the fact that there's more people coming in, there's more institutions, there's more use cases, that generally just means it can still go up, but not as much as previously. So, it's tough to say at this point.
Could you give a probability? Like what probability do you think that this cycle stays on track and performs in similar patterns as past cycles versus what do you think the probability is that we go higher?
That we go higher? And what number are we saying? And I guess the question is, are we talking just Bitcoin or are we talking the total crypto market cap? Because so far we've only discussed Bitcoin. We'll talk total crypto market cap in a second. I would say the probability is fairly high that Bitcoin beats last cycle. And the only reason I say that is because there is a probability that we have a Bitcoin strategic reserve in the US. And if that happens, maybe the total crypto market cap still ends. We think it hits 10 trillion this cycle. Maybe that still happens, but just Bitcoin dominance goes to like fucking 80% or something ridiculous, small chance, but like that could happen. But that's basically like that one thing has to happen. Otherwise, I think we're probably tracking somewhere between 150 and 200, same as we've been saying.
Okay. So more likely that we track. Small probability that we go higher if something like the strategic national reserve happens.
And honestly, at this point, you want to have the more bearish take. You don't want to be thinking and hoping that it gets to 500K, which is why when you said there's still plenty of time left, I gave I shook my head like, it's not that it can't happen. It's not that it won't happen. It's just like, that's what's going to make you ride this thing back down to wherever we go in the next bear market, right? And so like you wanted to be very bullish last year and earlier this year. Now you want to start to flip bearish. And I'm sorry, but I'm going to come on this podcast as I always do every week. And I'm always so bullish. And like, I'm probably going to start getting more and more bearish as everyone else gets more and more bullish. But that's for a good reason. Hopefully that's going to help you guys not ride this thing back down to the bottom.
Okay. Let's take a look at total crypto market cap, because I think that tells a very interesting story as well. When we look at past cycles, and how total crypto market cap has performed, how is that broken down?
Yeah, so total crypto market cap is an interesting one. We are currently sitting at, 3.2 trillion. If we look at the previous cycles, we went up 36,000% from 2015 to 2018. This is bottom to peak. And then that was going from 2 billion up to 700 billion-ish. Crazy. And then last cycle, we went up 3,200%. Okay. And then this cycle, we are already up. What are we up here?
1,300%.
No, that's the potential. I think we're currently up 4x, I think it was.
We're up 4x, yeah.
Yeah, up a 4x, okay? So 300%. We think we get to about 10 trillion, the total crypto market cap, which would mean a 1,300% increase from bottom to top. So that would mean that we don't outperform the past cycle, right? So again, who knows what happens here? Maybe Bitcoin outperforms, but total market cap stays the same, right? Or fits this like cycle of diminishing returns. Because I still feel like 10 trillion feels like the right amount here, but Bitcoin only going to 150 just seems odd that we're already at 100K. But maybe it's just an accelerated cycle, and that's just all there is to it. I don't know. There's a lot of kind of weird things to think about here, though. This cycle, we've never had so many freaking tokens in our entire life, right? So it's very different than any cycle before this. Last cycle we had a bunch of tokens, but it wasn't that many tokens. Now we literally have like I don't forget how many it is, like tens of thousands of tokens launching daily, at least the meme coin side of things. And then we also have a shit ton of like actual tech tokens, like the application tokens and L2 tokens and all that stuff, which we didn't have last cycle. We had a few DeFi tokens, and that was like kind of it other than L1s. So this is the first cycle where we have so many sectors, right? And so the question really is, do these sectors, do these tokens actually gain adoption this cycle? And do they really get a lot of liquidity? Or does it remain like it always has, which is like Bitcoin gets most of it, ETH gets a lot of it, and then like Sol and some L1s get most of it? Because like usually that's how it's been. It's just L1s get all the liquidity and the rest of the tokens are kind of whatever. There was a few tokens that did really well last cycle, like Uniswap and Maker and those. And so the question really is, what happens with all these tokens this cycle? And that's what I'm still unsure of. Again, this cycle, where is it different? Well, we have Trump coming in, who's probably going to make it legal to hold all these tokens. Last cycle, institutions, didn't matter where you were in the world, you couldn't hold these tokens, other than like some hedge funds. But like the big ones couldn't. This cycle, I don't even know if that happens this cycle. Like, yes, it's going to be legal when Trump comes in, but like Trump doesn't come in until January, and it's going to take, I don't know, months, years. There are funds that we talked about before that are already buying this stuff, but it's a small amount compared to like the big, like all the pension funds around the world that start to buy this. Really, they can only buy ETH and Bitcoin. And so I don't know if a lot of these tokens get a lot of adoption outside of retail. And I mean, retail did this last year. Maybe retail even had more money last cycle than this cycle, I would say, because they had all those free stimmy checks. We don't have free stimmy checks this time around, right? We're not printing a shit ton of money. And so that's the thing where I'm like, I don't know, it's a very different cycle, different dynamic. Maybe just Bitcoin and maybe ETH, if it starts to pick up a bid, really, really dominates here. And that's what drives that total crypto market cap up, which means Bitcoin really outperforms last cycle. And so like that's a potential as well. The key thing here is like, I know I'm saying just a bunch of what ifs, but that's where we're at, right? Like you've got to pay attention to what's happening this cycle. Where is the capital flowing this cycle? It's probably not going to be the same as every other cycle. That's the key thing in terms of where capital flows. But I think crypto total market cap still probably, I don't see any reason why it's not around 10 trillion. I don't think it's going to like crazy outperform again, unless we get this strategic reserve. Maybe Bitcoin goes to just like a gajillion market cap, but we'll see.
When you think about your own investment plan and how to plan when you're going to take profits, one of the most important things to do as an investor, and also one of the hardest things to do. It's so much easier to buy than it is to sell for some reason. How do you know when we're at the top? How do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, so first, you never know. And I think that's the first thing you want to like ingrain in your head, is that you are not going to call the top. I guarantee you no one here is going to call it, not even us, right? So you won't know the top. The next thing is like, don't base it on prices. I know right now we're looking at historical rate, return on investments. We're looking at prices, et cetera. That's a guide. That's just like a nice to have. It's one data point. You can use it, but in technical analysis and things around that can be useful, but it's not really everything you want to look at. You want to look at a bunch of different indicators. Macro is probably the most important. So what's happening with liquidity? I think that's the biggest thing. What's happening with rates? What's happening with inflation? What's happening with GDP, right? Where are we in the business cycle? We've talked about this a ton on the podcast. To me, that's probably the most important thing to look at. And so that's my first thing that I'm always looking at. The other things you're looking at outside of macro and how that world is looking and where we are in the business cycle, you're looking at a lot of kind of on-chain indicators and profit indicators. You just had someone on the podcast, I think it was last week, maybe it was this week.
Yeah, Philip Swift from Bitcoin Magazine Pro.
Yeah, great episode. Highly recommend everyone go check that one out. Where he went over like MVRV, there's the Nupal. I don't think he covered that one, but that's one we look at. And a few other indicators like the Pi cycle indicator. And these are all kind of looking at moving averages / looking at how far in profit are the holders of Bitcoin. Because generally there's a point where people are going to sell. And it usually kind of matches the same thing. It's what you see with the MVRV and Nupal. And so we look at a lot of on-chain indicators that can really help you understand that. Then we kind of just look at like sentiment. So like, where is the fear and greed index? What's going on in the space? Like, is everyone talking about crypto? Is everyone all in on crypto? If it is, like, well, then there's just not much more room you can go, right? So we're looking at sentiment. Is everyone talking about it on, on crypto Twitter? Is everyone talking about it on Instagram and TikTok now? What's going on like, is your Uber driver like have their coin stats chart up on their screen in trading view looking at meme coins? Like, these are signs like, hey, maybe things are getting a bit crazy here. So we look at that, and then we kind of look at flow of capital. Like, obviously, if regulation comes around and nation states start to buy this stuff, then like none of this shit matters. Your on-chain stuff doesn't matter, right? And it's like we're in a whole different paradigm. We're not there yet. There's a chance it happens. A lot of people, I think, are maybe thinking too high probabilities that's going to happen. At least that's what I see in our pro Discord. And I'm kind of like, look, I wish it happens. I really hope it does, but it's still a stretch. So, I mean, these are just all things that you have to keep an eye on. What we do is every Thursday in pro, for those that, don't know how to track all this stuff, and, there's a million indicators you need to do this. It's very difficult and expensive if you want to get all these different subscriptions. Well, you can just go pro. And in pro, we update this every single Thursday. We have 6 different charts. Plus, I comment and give a breakdown of my thoughts on all these charts and where we're at every single week. Every Thursday, this comes in your inbox if you're a pro member, and you just get to see where we're at. And we will help you not get the top, but ideally and hopefully start selling on the way up and maybe on the way down as well, right? But taking profits at the right time, taking profits with the right assets at the right point in the business cycle. And so, of course, you can get 40% off right now for those that want to go pro. If you are not pro right now, honestly, you're a little bit crazy, because I don't know how else to help you if you're not going pro. Like, pro is where you're going to get all the help you possibly need in terms of this stuff. So why not, right?
Yeah, it feels like if you're not pro, I hope you either you get your research and your data somewhere else, in which case all the power to you, or you have a savant genius investor mind and you don't need to look at charts and look at data to make the right decisions.
We
So
made
otherwise,
pro to be the thing that I needed last cycle, and I think all my friends needed last cycle, right? If we just had that, we were all good. And that's actually the whole idea of why we made this. So, we're looking at all these data points every single day and trying to figure out where we go from here. In summary, though, my base case is I do think Bitcoin might outperform last cycle, but I think total market cap doesn't outperform last cycle in terms of its growth or return on investment. So it's going to be an interesting one to watch, though. I think the big thing I'm looking at right now, Jay, is we've moved so fast up to 100K. Okay, or close to 100K. I keep saying that. We're not actually there yet. So I'm getting a little ahead of myself too. But macro is still not there. We still aren't printing a ton of money. Rates are still at 4.5. And so I wonder if we're going to do the same thing we did earlier in the year, which was we ran up so fast. We hit all-time highs before the halving, which has never been done before. And everyone's like, accelerated cycle. Like, this is going to be crazy, blah, blah, blah. It's going to be a shortened cycle. And then we had like 8 months of chop, or whatever, 9 months of kind of down only chop. I don't know if that happens, because hopefully in the next few months, we start to get quantitative easing and we do lower interest rates. My base case is that doesn't happen, but probably a pullback happens here at some point. I don't think we're just going to keep going all the way up to 150K and like that's the end of the cycle by like December, right? Even though people are starting to say that on crypto Twitter, or like it's super cycle, we're going to go straight to 500K. Like, even if we did hit 150K or 175K, that still could take until October of next year. Like, it could take a year for that to happen. And that's still incredible returns, right? And it still means there's time for altcoin season and everything else to happen. So just don't get too far ahead of yourself here. We should be excited right now. We should congratulate ourselves, pat ourselves on the back to be in crypto at, with this crazy run we just had. But like, probably this doesn't just continue for the next year,
Yeah. I want to know, everybody listening in, what do you guys think the probability is of, do you think it's more likely that this is a different cycle and Bitcoin outperforms and perhaps total crypto market cap also outperforms? Or do you think it's likely that we're in the same thing is happening again, rinse and repeat and learn from the past? Let us know what you guys think. As Kyle said, if you're not a pro member, you might be taking crazy pills. And I don't mean that because I'm trying to pump our own bags here. I mean it because we're genuinely here to help you. We're here to help you guys make money. We're here to help you guys change your lives with your investments. And if we're not doing that, let us know. please tell us what we can do to help you guys out more. Greatly appreciate all of you every day of the week. Thanks so much for listening, and everybody have a wicked awesome day. As always, if you liked today's episode, please hit subscribe and make sure you follow us so you don't miss out on the next one. There's also a link in the description to our free 5-minute daily newsletter where we simplify crypto for you while making you laugh. And if you're willing to step up your crypto investing game, we're going to also leave a link for Milk Road Pro. You get access to our portfolio where you can see exactly what we are buying. This is your number one resource to help you invest successfully in crypto. One final note, this show is for educational purposes only, and nothing we say is financial advice. Investing in crypto or any asset is risky, and you should never invest more than you can afford to lose. Thanks so much for listening, and my friends, have a wicked awesome day.